Welcome to our first Super Bowl, a Fundamentals of Soup class. We're so glad you've joined us tonight, and we have a fun night planned for you. We'll start with some words from Pastor Adam and prayer, and then we'll go to the buffet so that you can sample some soups that generous members of our congregation have prepared to get you in the soup spirit. And then we'll talk soup. Before we get started, let's open with some words from Pastor Adam Sornchai of St. John Lutheran Church, Windfall. While you're finishing up your soup sampler, I just wanted to do some introductions quick. This event is brought to you by Bread for All People, the outreach arm for St. John Lutheran Church, Windfall in Cardington. I see many familiar faces who participated in our Rock the Crock class, and as a result of your feedback, we bring you the Super Bowl class too. There are many people to thank for this class. First, the many people who contributed soup and crackers and rolls and cookies and brownies and giveaways. Thank you so much. Helping here tonight include Sandy, who's organized the soup and dessert buffet tables, Pastor Adam for staffing our check-in table, Deb for collecting your admission fees, more on that later, and Cindy for collecting our free will offering. Thank you all so much, and thank you for joining us. It's no coincidence that we're hosting the first Super Bowl around the same time as the NFL's Super Bowl. The NFL hosted their first Super Bowl on January 15, 1967. In fact, the 52nd Super Bowl will be played on February 4th. While not as intense competition, and we're certainly not in a warm place, we begin our first Super Bowl tonight, so let's get started with a game. We'll play the alphabet soup game. And this appears in your student workbook on page 4. Let's split into teams of 4. And we're going to be timed in this game. You'll have 3 minutes to work together to list a type of soup that starts with each letter of the alphabet. Ready, set, go. All right, let's cover what we're going to work on tonight. We're, of course, going to learn how to make different kinds of soup in different preparations. So we'll talk about soup types, cookware. We'll create your own recipe. Talk about finishing touches to your soup, some quick tips, troubleshooting, and super leftovers. So let's talk soup. Well, I can't really think of anything more satisfying than soup. It's filled with nutrients because of the many possible ingredient combinations like meat and veggies and grains and spices and herbs and fruit. And it's served at all courses of a meal because you can serve soup as a full meal. It can be a side dish. It could be a snack or even dessert. It's easy to prepare and, of course, very economical. And it's the perfect comfort food. The combination of the proteins and the carbs and other nutrients, it gives us a steady supply of energy and reminds us of warm memories. Both of these soups pictured have a place in our busy lives. Campbell's soup, of course, is good, and ramen noodles were perhaps every college student's first choice in cooking cheap and on the fly. Your admission today was canned or dried soup that will be donated to the Cardington Community Food Pantry. That's pictured there above in this picture. To our team collecting these, how many items will we be giving back to our community? Deb? Well, here we are into the nuts and bolts of soup. These are the basic soup types, and there's 6 of them. The first one is bisque. It's a rich, thick, smooth soup that's made with shellfish, such as lobster or shrimp, and it's usually thickened by pureeing the ingredients or adding cream. And I hope There's some kind of transitions as we go through all of these. A chowder is a thick and chunky soup, and traditionally chowder is made with seafood or fish, but chowders nowadays are made with poultry and veggies and cheese. These have all become very popular. Next is stock. It's a thin, clear liquid and in which meat or poultry or fish has been simmered with vegetable and herbs. And while it's normally used as an ingredient in other soups, it can be enjoyed as a light course on its own. Next, we'll talk about gazpacho. That's a cold vegetable soup often made with tomatoes as the key ingredient. And we move on to gumbo, which is a hearty bowl of seafood, vegetables, and meat chunks that usually have a thick broth and typically some Creole seasonings. And finally, a stew is a very thick soup based on chunks of meat or occasionally fish or vegetables. And the thick soup-like broth is a combination of the stewing liquid and the natural juices of the food being stewed. Here's some various cookware that you can use. You can see pictured here a soup pot, crock pot, soup pan, Dutch oven. Variety of tools to be used. And I think that it is the best medicine ever. Let's watch a quick video on how to prepare what many of us consider the best medicine, chicken noodle soup.
Oh, yes!
See what I mean? That's medicine. Quick and easy. So now it's your turn and it's time to create your own soup recipe. The basic recipe appears in your workbook on page 6. Let's take a look at 4 flexible ingredients you might consider using in your own creation. So here they are. The 4 ingredients are meat, vegetables, herbs, beans, and other. First, let's talk about meats. So you should use about 8 ounces in a general quantity of recipes, or general quantity in recipes. So 8 ounces of boneless chicken meat, turkey, beef, lean pork, and cut that into about 1-inch pieces. Or you could use ground meat such as beef or turkey, chicken, or sausage. The next ingredient is vegetables, and you'll use about 3 cups of those, and you can use an assortment or you could pick just one. Some recommendations include onion, green peas, small broccoli flowerets, carrots, potatoes, corn, zucchini, peppers, tomatoes. Dried herbs is the next one, and you would use about 1/2 teaspoon, and you can pick one: rosemary, oregano, basil, Italian seasoning, crushed red pepper. And last is beans and other. You should use about 1 cup of that, but that could include canned beans, such as kidney beans, black beans, great northern beans, or navy beans, and you should put those in rinsed and drained. Or you could use cooked barley, cooked rice, or cooked pasta. So let's refer back to your basic recipe in your workbook and see how it's done. And we'll use this basic recipe format to come up with a recipe for chicken noodle soup. And we should start out with 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil. And let's add our 8 ounces of meat. So in this case, it would be chicken cut into 1-inch pieces. You could also use a rotisserie chicken. Then you'll need to add 3 cups of chopped veggies. You could use frozen, like a mirepoix mix that has onions, carrots, and celery. And then add 32 ounces of broth. Of course, in this case, I would use chicken broth. And then another staple, but we won't use it in this case, is half of a 6-ounce can of tomato paste. Another common addition could be a 1-ounce envelope of onion soup mix, but we're not going to need it here. You should add a half a teaspoon of dried herbs, and of course, poultry seasoning would be really good in a chicken noodle soup recipe. And then you could add 1 cup of beans or other, and in this case, I'd use egg noodles here. And then you'll continue with the remainder of the recipe. So, in a 4 to 5 quart Dutch oven, heat 1 tablespoon of the oil over medium heat. Add meat and cook and stir until meat is brown and cooked through if necessary. Drain fat. Remove the meat from the pan and then set aside, and in that same Dutch oven, heat the remaining 1 tablespoon of oil over medium heat and add vegetables. Cook and stir for 3 to 5 minutes until the vegetables are crisp tender, and return the meat to the Dutch oven, stir in the remaining ingredients, and bring to a boil on high heat. Then reduce the heat, simmer covered for 15 minutes. Then lift up the lid and stir in beans or your other ingredient and season to taste with salt and pepper. There you go. You just made your own recipe. Now let's work on some tips and tricks for soup. And we'll start with finishing touches. These are the things that you would do when you prepare to serve it. So you could use nuts and seeds, like I recommend pumpkin seeds on a squash soup. Crackers or oyster crackers or goldfish are really delicious on tomato soup or chili. You could also use veggie chips or potato chips on top. You can use cheese, croutons like on onion soup or on top of a creamy soup. I might also recommend fresh herbs like basil in a minestrone or a vegetable soup. You could use bacon bits or dairy like yogurt or sour cream. Let's move on to some make it quicker tips. And these are just some really simple tips and tricks and hints that you can make your soup faster if you're in a rush when you come home. You could buy pre-cut or frozen vegetables. I talked about the mirepoix mix earlier. That's onions, carrots, and celery already in a small dice, and you can buy that in the frozen food section by the vegetables. You could also use carrot matchsticks instead of a dice, or you could buy shredded carrots. And you could saute them in butter because the fat in meat takes longer to get that taste. You could use seafood because it cooks faster than meat. If you use meat, you should brown it, but you could also brown it under the broiler or use deli meat to make it faster. Another suggestion is to use hot broth or water or add salsa or pesto. Another quick tip is to use small items like small vegetables such as shredded potatoes, canned potatoes, or frozen. You can also use a pack that they sell in the produce section that's cabbage and carrots that's already shredded. They use it for coleslaw, but you could put it in a soup. You can use meatballs for your meat. And then you could use a thickener like roux or a slurry. A roux uses butter and then flour added to it to make it nice and golden brown and cook it for a few minutes. And then you're adding your rest of your soup ingredients to it, so you're adding hot. And in a slurry, you're mixing like cornstarch and water, for example, and adding something cold to the soup. Those are just some quick tips, but I also think it's important that we cover troubleshooting. If you're tasting your soup and you say, oh my goodness, my soup needs salt, look first for other ingredients that can give that taste. So you could add such ingredients like soy sauce or dried cheese like Parmesan. Also, you could add some hot water or milk, but not broth. I really don't have any proof that if you add potato to the pot, it doesn't make it so salty. So either add hot water or milk. Let's say that you taste it and you go, whoa, my soup is too runny. You want it to be thicker? You could simmer uncovered for a little bit, or you can puree some of the soup in a blender and return it back to the pot. Or you can add mashed potato flakes to make it thick. Let's say you taste it and you say, I don't really have a fix for this. My soup tastes burnt. It's better to prepare your soup by using a heavy bottom pan and stirring frequently, but if it's from scorched ingredients that gives it that taste, you may have to start over or, get takeout. And then let's say last, oh boy, my soup is curdled. Like, for example, this might happen if you defrosted soup, frozen soup. So what you'll do is strain the broth into a blender, reserving the solids, and blend it until smooth, and then reheat the broth with the solids over low heat. You saved it then if you do that way. I'd like to talk to you now about leftovers for soup. And if you want leftovers to take to lunch or eat for a snack, you're going to want to make it in large batches. And for the most part, I've seen recipes for soup that are for 4 to 6 servings. So you might want to double your recipe. Also, of course, soup makes great last-minute lunches. You're going to want to cool it quickly for storage. And to refrigerate soup, you can cover it and refrigerate it for 2 or 3 days. To freeze soup, you can cover and freeze it in your freezer for up to 2 months. And if you want to cook that frozen soup, you're going to thaw it overnight and then heat it up. Remember, don't heat it in the crock pot. Avoid freezing soups with cubed potatoes. They get too mushy, or soups thickened with cornstarch or flour. Okay, quick review. We talked about all the soup types. There's 6 of those, and we talked about the various cookware that you can use to make your soup. We had you create your own recipe tonight, and we talked about how to finish them before serving. We also talked about ways that you can make your soup quicker, and some troubleshooting hints and ways you can use soup as leftovers. So now we want to give you our gifts to you. We have quite a few giveaways and door prizes, including additional crock pots, one with a stirrer, and some gift cards, as well as some soup bowls and serving utensils for soup. Thank you again for coming. We're so glad to see you again, and we look forward to producing another event that you've recommended in the survey questionnaire that you completed for us. Thanks for joining us, and have a good evening.